Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Victoria and this is Time and Tenderness. If you hear any background noise today, it is Layla. She is sitting right next to me as she often does for these videos, and Gabriel is down for his nap. Well friends, it has been 6 months. I am now 6 months postpartum and Gabriel is 6 months old. We are super excited. We just started doing solids with him and he is taking them like a champ. He had a whole chicken drumstick last night. We're doing baby-led weaning, so it's been very fun to just hand him things off of my plate that are safe for him to eat. So I handed him a whole chicken drumstick last night and he went to town on that. So we are having a lot of fun with this phase of raising a child. But I wanted to go ahead and have a postpartum Q&A with you all. So I asked over on my Instagram and here on YouTube if any of you had any questions for me in regards to my postpartum period. So many of you sent me some really good, really thought-provoking questions, and I just wanted to go ahead and get right into it. I have all the questions here on my phone. So the first question somebody asked me was, how do you process the disappointment of not getting a natural birth like you planned? Well, at first I started asking myself a lot of what if questions, mainly what if I had asked to push for 15 more minutes? What if when I got checked into the hospital, when they did the ultrasound to make sure that Gabriel was head down, what if I asked them to make sure that he was in a good position for delivery? What if I pushed in a different position? What if I pushed longer? What if I asked for forceps or a vacuum assisted delivery? I did find myself asking those what if questions a lot, and I really had to stop doing that to myself. And I talked with my doula, and I talked with my mom, and I talked with my husband a lot, because I tried so hard. So hard. Everybody who was in the room while I was pushing with Gabriel pretty much told me that they had not seen somebody try as hard as I did. So that was very comforting, knowing that I gave it my all when it came to pushing and trying to get him out. And there was just some things in life that come up in the middle of labor, and I've seen it when I work as a doula with other families. There's just some things that come up that are out of your control, and in my instance there was something wrong with my tailbone, something I could not foresee, something that nobody could have prepared for, and I'm still figuring out what it all was, whether it was an injury, whether it was just a fluke with Gabriel being in a bad position, whatever. Just some things come up. So I was very grateful I was in a position to have had a very safe and relaxing cesarean. I know not many people get that. So I would not say I am disappointed anymore. I just look at it back now and I recognize that things happened the way it happened for a reason, and I'm very grateful that they did happen, that I did have the choice, and that I had mentally prepared myself for all the options possible for me. So the next question I got asked is, did you have any complications during surgery? So short answer, no, I did not have any complications. I did have concerns about blood loss. That was something that I wanted to prevent. I wanted to prevent a postpartum hemorrhage or any sort of blood loss. That was very important to me. So I did go ahead and ask for the drug called TXA. I'll write down the whole name here on the screen. I asked for the drug TXA to be administered to me. I think I got 2 or 3 bags of that because they started about an hour before I started pushing, and then as that wore off, because I pushed for so long, they gave me more, and then ultimately I got some more in the operating room. But that drug was really amazing to help prevent any sort of postpartum hemorrhage or blood loss afterwards, so I was very grateful for that. But short answer, no, I did not have any complications whatsoever. The next person asked me, how do I deal with postpartum hair loss? Now, I thought maybe by some chance I was not going to experience postpartum hair loss until I reached 4 months postpartum, and I was washing my hair in the shower and I looked down and on my arms was covered with hair that had fallen out. Gobs and gobs and gobs of hair, and it was all going down the drain. It was clogging up the drain catcher that my husband puts there to help keep our drains clear. It was crazy. I'm very fortunate that I naturally have a lot of hair. I have very thick hair. Whenever I go get my hair done, my hairstylist Natisha always comments how much hair I have. So the loss of the hair wasn't very noticeable. I do notice a little bit thinning here, but nothing too crazy. Nothing that I'm very self-conscious about. I know it'll all come back, but I haven't been really doing anything with my postpartum hair loss. I've just been letting it take its course, but I do know some women suffer tremendously from it. Their whole head all their hair pretty much falls out. I have heard about like rosemary rinses, but I haven't tried it myself, haven't really looked into it, but I do know that you can like boil rosemary in water and then rinse that in your hair, and I think that helps. But that's the only advice I can give for that. So the next question that somebody asked me were, what were your postpartum must-haves / things that really helped you recover physically and mentally? So I was in a very unique and very, to be honest, privileged position to have a huge village of support around me. After Gabriel was born, my mother came and stayed with us for 2 whole weeks. She took care of everything, all the cooking, all the cleaning. She woke up with us for the first like 2 weeks. Every single time Gabriel woke up in the middle of the night, she woke up with us to help us, to teach us. And then after she left for a week, after those first 2 weeks, my mother-in-law came and she helped out with us during the day. And then after that week, my aunt came. She flew in from Georgia and she stayed with us for I think almost 2.5, almost 3 weeks, I believe. And again, she was the same as my mom, took care of all the cooking, all the cleaning. She woke up like every time Gabriel could not even whimper, like pout his lips without my aunt running to him. So we were very, very, very privileged to have such a support system around us, and I think that was definitely a must-have for me. And I recognize not everybody is able to do that, but if you are in a position where people are offering, hey, do you want me to stay? Do you need help during the day? Do you want me to come over? Try and accept. I know it can be very humbling, but you're not going to know how much help you need. It is very, very tiresome to be waking up in the middle of the night. You might think you have it all. You might think, yeah, the baby's sleeping really good, I'm getting naps throughout the day, but you just gave birth. It was very, even if you didn't have a C-section, you went through something. You went through a very hard labor, and you deserve rest for the first couple weeks after the baby is born. So if people are offering to help, even if they are offering to just bring you and your family meals, just run errands for you so you don't have to leave the house, I highly recommend you accept any help that is offered to you. Okay, so the next question is, what advice or encouragement would you give to a mama who ends up needing a C-section? Well, first, I would try to advise you not to blame yourself. There was nothing you did wrong, nothing anybody else did wrong. Just try and remember that these things happen, and we are living in a very great time in history where we have all these options, these life-saving options at our fingertips, at our disposal. We're very privileged in that sense to live in an era where we can either have a natural birth or a C-section, or we can attempt a natural birth, and if something happens, we have a fail-safe with a C-section. So I would try very hard not to beat yourself up, not to feel that you are a failure, because you're not. You are not a failure. You worked hard just as anybody else worked hard. And just remember, sometimes things happen, things out of our control. And we have to accept that sometimes in life there are certain areas where we're not in control. So just try and keep that in mind. Do not be hard on yourself. Remember that you brought life into the world, and at the end of the day, that is all, that is really the epitome of triumph. But I do recognize that C-sections can be traumatic, especially if you were not prepared for it. So if you find that you're dealing with a little bit of trauma, if you are really struggling with remembering how your birth went, if thinking about your birth and about your labor is causing you a lot of mental and emotional anguish, I strongly encourage you to reach out to a professional, to a therapist, maybe to your midwife, your OB. Tell them that you have these very negative feelings, because sometimes there is trauma there that you do need medical help for. Medical help in the sense that you need somebody who is trained to talk you through it, to help you process what happened. So bottom line, do not be hard on yourself. If you are dealing with a lot of negative emotions, I strongly encourage you to reach out for help and support. So the next question that I got asked is, what would you tell a pregnant mama who isn't planning on a C-section how to mentally prepare for the possibility? So I've always said it in any type of birth related videos that I have here on my channel and on TikTok and other areas of my online presence, is to take a childbirth education class. Even if you are planning a home birth, a birth center birth, take a childbirth education class, an independent childbirth education class with an independent childbirth educator, and go over the possibility of C-section. Watch videos of what it looks like. Make a birth plan and for the possibility of having a C-section, because you never know what might come up, you never know what might happen, and being educated is one way to help you mentally prepare. That way you're not going in completely blind as to what takes place. Not many people know that when you go into the OR, things look very different, things are cold. And if you are going in completely blind, that can be very scary, and for some people it can be traumatizing. But if you prepare education-wise ahead of time, that can just mentally prepare you to be in a good place, to kind of know what to expect, and to be prepared for that possibility. So the strongest thing, the most important thing I can strongly advise for anybody who is pregnant, who is trying to learn about pregnancy and plan for their labor, is even if you are planning, even if it is your bottom wish to just have a natural birth, wherever that may be, still plan for a C-section. Still plan, still make a birth plan A, a birth plan B, a birth plan C. Like I did in my birth story video. I had 3 birth plans. I had plan A, plan B, plan C. Have everything planned. One analogy I like to talk about when I talk to families who are pregnant and they're saying, you know, I want to have this labor, you know, ideally I would feel comfortable, you know, having a hospital birth, blah, whatever their plan is. This is a good analogy that I give to these families. And that analogy goes like this. Imagine that you are going on a road trip, and it is a long road trip. You're going to be in the car for X amount of hours, and you want to take the coastal scenic highway. That is the way you want to drive to go on your vacation, to leave your house and to go to your rental property. You want to take the coastal scenic highway. Now, you can just get on the highway and take the coastal scenic highway, but what happens if for some reason a storm pops up and the road washes out, or there's a detour, or something happens, there's an accident up ahead, and all of a sudden you're stuck in traffic, and now the clock is counting down. You have only a certain number of hours to get to your destination for check-in. So you have to check in by a certain time. It would be wise before heading on your road trip to make sure that you've mapped out backup routes to get to your destination, because you don't want to waste any time. It's more beneficial to have backup plans than it is to just go in blindly, only knowing one way. The next person asked me, would you suggest a C-section over a natural birth? No. There is this common misconception that C-sections are the easy way out because you just lie there and the baby, you don't have to push, you don't have to do anything. No, you are having multiple layers of your body cut through, fat layers, tissue layers, your uterus cut open. The recovery time is a lot harder with a C-section than with a natural birth. Now, I know I have friends who have had a traumatic vaginal birth and then had a C-section the second time around, and their C-section ended up being much more peaceful than their natural labor. That does happen, I do admit that, but in the grand scheme of things, it is major surgery. So the recovery time can be a little bit longer than a natural birth. So no, and even doctors and midwives will agree that, you know, going under the knife and going under the knife multiple times, especially if you've had multiple cesareans, is not the wisest thing. And once again, we are grateful for cesareans, and they are a wonderful blessing, and they are life-saving and even sometimes emotionally saving. There are people who have suffered from trauma, from past abuse, that have chosen to get C-sections because they don't want to go through something that potentially triggers that past trauma or past memories of past abuse. So we are grateful for having the option of C-sections, but it does not negate the fact that it is major surgery. The next question is, what's the healing process like for a C-section? And other people ask, you know, to talk about the physical recovery aspect of having a C-section. So I would definitely have to say the physical recovery aspect was rough. It's very difficult. There's a lot of things that you take for granted that you realize you were taking for granted after you have a C-section, such as sneezing, coughing, getting out of bed. Oh my gosh, sneezing and coughing were the most painful things to do after having a C-section. Walking for long periods of time also was very, you don't realize how much you use your core even for the most simplest of tasks. So yeah, it takes time to physically recover, but you do ultimately physically recover. It just takes a little bit longer. Okay, so Gabriel has now woken up from his nap, so if you hear any rattles in the background, that is him. You might even hear him as well. There goes the rattle. So I have 2 questions left to answer that you guys sent me, and this second to last question is, did you feel that your cesarean was traumatic? No, I did not feel that it was traumatic at all whatsoever. I think a lot of my feelings towards my cesarean not being traumatic have to do with the fact of how mentally prepared I was. And that goes back to what I said earlier about being educated, about taking a good childbirth education class, about becoming familiar with the procedures, watching videos, and having a plan in the event that were to happen. So because I was well prepared, because I was familiar with what the procedure looked like, with what to expect, I was not going in blind and I was not scared at all whatsoever. I of course had my worries of, oh my gosh, what if something happens? But I felt very at peace and tranquil because I knew what to expect. So going back, I strongly feel that being educated, being prepared, bottom line, is what helped my cesarean not be traumatic. So once again, that is my biggest piece of advice when you are pregnant, when you're preparing to have your baby. No matter what you ideally hope for when it comes to your pregnancy, when it comes to your labor, still be prepared for all possible outcomes. Don't just have it in your mind of, oh, well, if this happens, I'll be okay. No, actually prepare. Think about it like you're actually going to have this take place. Educate yourself, watch videos, write up a birth plan of how you would like a C-section to go if it were to take place. That way, if it does happen, if it does come up, if the doctor comes into the room and says, hey, I'm strongly recommending a C-section, you're not left with a bunch of questions, of final decisions, of what you would like to be done, of how you would like things approached. No, you've already educated yourself and you have that plan that you can easily say, okay, I'm ready, let's go. Now, the very last question someone has asked me is, how is my mental health? At the end of March, beginning of April, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and anxiety, mainly anxiety. I was dealing with a lot of anxious feelings, thoughts, and worries, and intrusive thoughts surrounding feeding Gabriel and my breast milk and breastfeeding journey. Did this make my breastfeeding journey and my time feeding Gabriel unenjoyable? No, not at all. I fully enjoyed it. I loved every minute of it. I just developed a lot of routines and obsessions surrounding feeding him and my breast milk that it became concerning. I was very fearful that if I changed any aspect of my routine, or if there was any change in my routine whatsoever, no matter how small, that I would wake up the next morning and my milk supply would be decreased or would decrease. So this was a very irrational thought. This was very consuming, all life consuming, because I strongly felt that I needed to uphold a certain routine when it came to my pumping schedule and my feeding schedule, that if there was any change whatsoever, I genuinely felt something bad was going to happen. Now, I thought that what I was doing was normal, that I had just a very strict routine and that routines were fine, and that I was just being very organized. It wasn't until my birth doula let me know that I might need to talk to somebody, that some of the things I was doing was not normal, that I finally just took a step back and looked at what I was doing and realized that I needed to talk to someone. So for instance, we would go just down the road to my in-laws, and I strongly felt that I needed to pump for the evening at 6:30 every night. That way I could pump again before bed at 9:30 every night. And if I was late to pumping at 6:30 or 9:30, the whole evening was a disaster. My mood was in the tank. I was very inconsolable. My husband had to talk with me and reason with me and sit down and do math with me to show me that I was still feeding Gabriel adequately, that my milk supply was not decreasing. It was a whole ordeal. I was, and I still kind of am, very religiously keeping track of all of his feedings and all of my pump sessions and how much output I give him. It was very, very rigorous before, about a month ago. Now it's kind of gotten a little lax. I've gotten a little bit better. But it was very, if I was away from Gabriel, I would call my husband. Did you feed him? How many ounces in a bottle did you give him? Exactly what time did you give it to him? How long did he take to finish that bottle? I needed to write it all down. And that was like an obsessive compulsive thing that I needed to do, because for every bottle that he had, I felt the need that I needed to pump to make up for that lost feed of him having not latched onto me. Instead, he got a bottle. So I felt the strong need that I needed to pump to make up for that feed, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So it got to the point that our freezer in our refrigerator was filled with milk. And then we bought a second freezer in our home, a 1 cubic foot freezer, and that was also filled with milk. All of which I was not touching. I had milk in the freezer in our refrigerator, I had milk in the deep freezer, and then I had fresh milk in the refrigerator. And Gabriel would get the fresh milk in the refrigerator every day, and then I would rotate some into the freezer. I had this whole schedule, this whole routine. None of the freezer milk was getting touched. And I just had it in my mind that I needed to have this freezer stash for some reason, because what if something happens? What if he needs it? What if my milk supply next week dries up, I wake up the next morning and there's nothing there? And I know you're probably thinking, well, Victoria, there's formula, fed is best, that's all good. I understand that, and as a doula, I've supported many families with their feeding journey, but this was beyond reason. This was beyond logic. This was something very deep within me that I was doing, and I did not realize I was doing it. So once it was brought to my attention that I needed to talk to somebody, I sat here on the couch on a Tuesday evening crying, realizing that I had a problem, and realizing, looking back at the previous weeks and the previous months, over how low I was feeling, how unhappy I was feeling, that I didn't realize it. I was feeling very unhappy with things around the house, with doing YouTube, and that's really when I realized I had a problem, because I was not, if you go back to my video library, you'll see that there's lots of large gaps of time that I did not make any videos, and that was because I was just so down in the dumps and unmotivated, but I didn't quite realize it. Now, I never wanted to hurt myself, I never wanted to hurt Gabriel, I never wanted to hurt anybody in my life. I just felt like I was just existing, and I would go through periods where my mood would wax and wane very dramatically. One day I would feel on top of the world, able to conquer everything, and then the next day I would be down in the dumps, unable to get off the couch, feeling very worthless. So looking back now, I can see how not bad I was, but I could see all the signs were there that other people were seeing, but they were just trying very hard to be loving and supportive, and they wanted me to take the first step of saying, I need help. And it was like, going back, it was a Tuesday, my husband was at work. I came to grips all day that I was probably going to need to reach out to my midwife. My husband walked in the door from being at work, and I looked at him and I said, I think I need to talk to somebody. And he said, excuse me, he said, about your breast milk problem, about your obsessions. And I was like, oh, so other people are seeing it. He was like, yeah, we've been waiting. So that night I sent an email. I sat on this couch that Tuesday night, crying, and I hit send on a message on the messaging service that my midwife uses, and immediately the next morning they called me and they wanted to see me that same day. So that very next day, that Wednesday, I loaded up in the car. I brought Gabriel with me. I went to the midwife and she assessed me and I was prescribed Zoloft. I'm on a very low dose of Zoloft now. I have been on it for over a month and it takes a couple weeks to kick in, and I was very worried at first that it wasn't working because I would again go through that wave of one day I felt on top of the world and the next day I felt so low in the dumps. But after about 3 weeks, my mood has kind of stabilized. I feel on top of the world all the time now. I feel like I have a grip on my life again, and I feel good. So it was an extremely humbling experience to have to step out of my comfort zone and admit that I have a problem. And my friend Audrey of Mind, Body, and Soul of Homemaking here on YouTube, I'll link her in the description down below. She was the one who actually submitted this question of how is my mental health. She actually helped me so much. She was one of the first people I reached out to and told her about what I was going through, what I was feeling, because she's very open about her own mental health journey and some of the things that she's been through, and she has just been such a blessing in my life to be able to talk to. She's very reasonable. She is also so very wise. So she was one of the first people I talked to about it, and she was excited for me, not excited that I was dealing with something, but excited to be able to help me. And you know, I think that's the best kind of help, is when somebody is excited to help you and at the same time they make you feel good about being helped, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So yes, I am now publicly saying I have postpartum depression and anxiety, and I didn't realize it. And if you even have that question in your mind of, is this normal? Am I normal? Are other people going through this? Reach out for help, because I was having that question in my mind. I was pushing these feelings down, saying that there's people out there who have it much worse. I don't want to come across as being dramatic. I just need to pull myself up by the bootstraps. But in the back of my mind, a little voice was screaming to me, no, Victoria, something is wrong. You need to reach out for help. And I was ignoring that little voice for so long until somebody else brought it to my attention. And it was at that point, after I sent that email, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. After I had the session with my midwife, a further weight was lifted off my shoulders. I have also started therapy, online therapy, bi-weekly. Online, a therapist calls me on the phone for about 30 minutes a week just to gauge everything, just to make sure that the medicine is still working and all that. And that has been a huge weight off my shoulders. So if you have had a baby, and postpartum depression and anxiety can creep up on you at any time after you've had a baby. It's most prominent within the first year. But it can come up anytime, and it's all linked to our hormones. Our hormones did a big change, a big fluctuation with pregnancy, and sometimes it takes a while for our bodies to go back into their baseline. And as our bodies are trying to find their baseline, things can just be a little bit wacky, and it can affect our mental health. So if you have that little question in your mind, if there is a little voice in your head saying, hey, something's not right, it's best, and I strongly encourage you to reach out for help and support. Well, my dear friends, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any other further questions down below regarding postpartum, pregnancy, all that stuff, and I can make another Q&A video in the future. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, especially the like button, because it does help other people find my channel. And I am really trying to grow my channel this year and reach out to more people and grow my little Time and Tenderness community here online. So please don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Bye.